Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. It's time for another book haul. So I think I'm just going to start titling these by what month they're in. So this is the book haul for October, I guess. And I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And I was going to do myself the favor of reminding myself what these books were about because I've hauled all of these a couple of months ago. But then I realized you guys would miss out on all the fun of seeing me remember what all these books are about. So let's remind ourselves what these books are about. I have a nice mix here of some pretty eclectic reads, and I'm excited about them, especially the ones that I already glanced at. Like for each of them, I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm ready for that. So let me go ahead and get started with the first one. The first one here is Everything Good Will Come. This is a debut novel. It is a coming of age story that is described as an original, witty coming of age tale. Tom Sawyer meets Jane Eyre with Nigerian girls. Yep, sign me up for that. And yeah, it doesn't actually on the back of my book say anything else about the book or the characters or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure it was the coming of age part that had me at hello. Also, I think in the bookstore when I originally picked it up, I did take the time to actually look at a more thorough explanation of the book. But let's skip that and just go to the first paragraph because on the back of the book, one of the blurbs also says, it put me into a spell from the first page to the very last. So let's check out that first page. It starts in 1971, I think, right? Yep. And it says, from the beginning, I believed whatever I was told, downright lies even, about how best to behave, although I had my own inclinations. At an age when other Nigerian girls were masters at ten-ten, the game in which we stamped our feet in rhythm and tried to outwit partners with sudden knee jerks, my favorite moments were spent sitting on a jetty pretending to fish. My worst was to hear my mother's shout from her kitchen window, any ton, come and help in here. I can relate to that. Like, who in their coming of age wants to go in and help? I guess a few of you who actually like to cook. I wasn't one of those people. So that is the first book, Everything Good Will Come. And in case you're interested in finding out any more information about any of the books that I show, I do put the title and the author in the description box below. Okay, the next book is one that I haven't heard of, but was actually is not a recent publish. It's put out by Ignatius Press. So there are religious themes in this book. I am anticipating that. I tend to really like what Ignatius Press puts out. I think it's very thoughtful, and their works are frequently well done. And this is The Father's Tale by Michael D. O'Brien. It is a huge, chunky book, over 1,000 pages. And this is a story, a fictional story about a Canadian bookseller named Alex Graham who is a middle-aged widower who has his quiet, like sort of bookseller life turned upside down when his college-age son suddenly turns up missing or has run off, and he finds himself on a journey going off to try and find his son and figure out what happens. And the thing that really drew me to this book, other than honestly just its size, because I love a good long book, is that it is quoted as being a modern retelling of the parables of the Good Shepherd and the prodigal son. And if you don't know, those are two parables that are told in the Bible, which are just short, like moral lessons. I think is the best way to explain it if you don't know much or anything about Christianity. The Bible has different short stories that are in it, and that is one of them. Well, those are two of them, honestly, and they're two of my favorite parables, and they're two really well-known ones. So I was just really interested in the story. One of the stories or parables talks about a good shepherd and how he is willing to go out after the one missing sheep. And then the story of the parable of the prodigal son. Right? Is that what they call it? Yeah, they call it that in here too. And the story of the prodigal son tells the story of a loving father who has two sons, and one of the sons, the prodigal one, potentially depending on how you interpret the story, the prodigal one, runs off and after asking for all his inheritance and lives just sort of a profligate life. And in that one, this son actually eventually finds his way home. So it's interesting the combination of this is the son who's maybe gone off, but then also the good shepherd is the father who's going to seek the son. So I can definitely see how those two stories could combine. I do also have to say that this book has French flaps and just feels really nice in hand. So I'm hoping that this just turns out to be a really warm, cozy story. It is also described as him being the father, having to face the uncertainty and anguish of loss and longing, and pulled into conflicts between nations, as well as eternal conflict between good and evil. So it also sounds like a good journey adventure story. And like I said, I've read things by Ignatius Press before, and I'm typically impressed by pretty much everything that they've put out, nonfiction and fiction. So I've got high hopes for this one. And this starts with chapter one, The End of His Life. On the first Sunday of Advent in the previous year, a man named Alexander Graham said a prayer that was to have unforeseen consequences. Okay. Okay. I'm ready. I don't know when I'll read this. Maybe I'll read it during Advent this year. It definitely seems like a long, cozy winter read that hopefully won't be too depressing, but will have a good uplift. I don't know how religious the themes in it will get, so I guess we'll see when I read it. Next book I have is Fool on the Hill by Matt Ruff. I randomly came across this book at my used bookstore and I don't remember. Oh, okay. I remember now what drew my attention to it because I was like, why would I have picked this up? It's because it's put out by Grove Press, and they are an independent publisher. They have published some books that you probably have heard of, and I have read and enjoyed. And so I do keep an eye out for them when I'm looking for books. I'm often looking for the publisher before I'm even looking for the title, unless there's a specific book I'm looking for. Anyway, I did look at this book and it says it is a magical storytelling tour de force. And it features a young writer whose name is S.T. George, who is a writer in residence at Cornell University, which automatically caught my attention. And it says he's looking for love and dragons to slay. And it just goes on in the most like strange fashion about the different characters that he meets, dogs and cats who speak, Shakespearean sprites who dress in Armani, and two mysterious women. He's caught up in an epic struggle of life and death, good and evil. And it says it's as fantastic as the epic quest of J.R.R. Tolkien, which is really high praise. So we'll see. It's supposed to be really funny, which I love a good funny read. And this was the book that made me say, okay, stop looking at them ahead of time and just talk about them as we go. Because I noticed when I open, it starts with a list of major characters, and it has the ST or Stephen Titus George, a storyteller, Aurora Borealis Smith, a nonconformist daughter, and then there are categories of characters in the book, such as the Bohemians, other human beings, the sprites, canines and felines, black hats, and then there's also cameo appearances, including Ezra Cornell as himself. And Ezra Cornell, if you don't know, is one of the founders of Cornell University. And yeah, I've got to read this for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to bother getting into here. But oh, let's read the opening because yeah, I want to know how you're going to start this off. The patron saint of daydreams. On a windless summer day in an uncertain year, more than a century after the founding of Cornell, a man who told lies for a living climbed to the top of the hill to fly a kite. He was a young man, a surprisingly wealthy one even for a professional liar, and he lived alone in a gaudy yellow house on Stewart Avenue. Hmm. Oh, yeah, I know everything he's talking about. I also picked up some science fiction. By the way, if I didn't mention, I'm going through books that I hauled whose titles start with E and F. Apparently, I've mixed them all together though, but you'll be able to tell the difference between the two, I'm sure. But I do have two science fiction here. One will be a reread for me, which is Flowers for Algernon. And I read this in high school. Like I feel like a lot of people did. I have not read it since high school. I have heard other people have read it since then, or like as adults who read it in high school, and they have all said that it holds up really well. So I'm really interested to try it again. I recall this being very sad, but I feel like I'd also be able to appreciate it more as an adult. This story is about Charlie Gordon, who is born with an unusually low IQ, which I wonder, like, what exactly does that mean? But I'm pretty sure the story explains that. And he is chosen for an experimental surgery that researchers hope will increase his intelligence. And this surgery has already been performed on a mouse or a lab rat. a lab mouse named Algernon. And so we follow the journey of Algernon, who's had his IQ increased, as well as Charlie Gordon. And it's definitely science fiction that is looking at medical technology and its impact and where the desire for human advancement comes into play with medical technology and ethics and all of that. And yeah, I'm already questioning the ethics of it, of being like, we need you to do surgery so that you can become more intelligent. Why do we not question these things? I mean, this book is clearly going to question that. And the opening of this is says progress report 1st March 3. And if I'm saying that weird, I'm going to show you. Like I had to figure that out because it's not spelled correctly. Dr. Strauss says I should write down what I think and remember and everything that happens to me from now on. And again, if you go back and look at that clip where I showed you it and pause, you'll see that none of that is spelled correctly either. I don't recall that part. That's going to be interesting. And I wonder how much of that I'm going to notice. It reminds me of like those little sentences and signs that you can see where people will put up a sentence. If I can find one, I'll put it on the screen for you. You won't notice that there's spelling errors in that sentence if you just glance at it. And it won't click to you that there are spelling errors in it until you finish the sentence and then you go back and look at it and you think you're crazy because it literally seems like the entire sentence has changed. I don't know if you've had that happen to you. It happens to me every single time, and it's a very bizarre feeling. And I have the feeling that entire opening chapter is going to be that experience for me because that happens to me a lot, and it's there's a reason for it. Basically, your brain, like, you don't actually see everything you see, your brain fills in a lot for you, like, so that your 2 eyes work together, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, next book is Found Audio, and this is, like, I think sort of a mystery, sci-fi, psychological thriller type of thing. It reminds me a bit of the vibes of, Solaris, which I recently read, and it's a super short book. This is put out by $2 Radio. I actually went to their, like, little headquarters, if you will, and this was one of the books that I decided to pick up while I was there, and I'm curious. I'm very curious. I feel like this is gonna be like a sit down, read in one sitting, one day kind of situation. And this says, and on the back, it talks about Amrapali Anna Singh, who is a historian and analyst capable of discerning the most cryptic and trivial details from audio recordings. And of all the things, this is one of the few books that I actually remember the premise of. Basically, she ends up being visited by this mysterious man. He gives her a cassette tape that has, as it says here, the deposition of an adventure journalist and his obsessive pursuit of an amorphous, legendary, and puzzling city of dreams. And the recording on the audio cassette that she receives is a deposition talking to this person or interviewing this person. And so you have the whole question of who made the recording and then why. And it says, despite being explicitly instructed not to, curiosity gets the better of her. She mails a transcript with her analysis to an acquaintance, and then she vanishes. And the man who gave her the cassette vanished as well. And the journalist is unnamed. And it, like, the audio is found, but people are going missing. I don't know. It sounds strange. I have heard that $2 Radio is kind of known for putting out some unique books, shall we call them? So I'm interested, and we open with a little letter here. It says transcribers letters, Office of Amrapali Anna Singh, PhD, University of Dutch Harbor, blah, 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 blah. Dear, and the name has been redacted. The strange circumstances that have brought me to write this letter are not few in number. But I would like to apologize in advance if I'm taking any liberties in sending you a rough, unfinished first draft of a nonfiction work in progress. Oh, I'm excited. Oh, and then we're going to get the transcriber's notes on the text. And then are we gonna get her transcription? Yeah, we do. We get tape 1 and the transcription. I can't wait. I'm excited. Ooh, do I have a bookmark in here? I do. Huh, it's for news. Anyway, don't matter. I'm excited. I'm curious. I want to know. I'm nosy. I think that's what I'm saying. In addition to coming of age stories, cozy books, funny stories, and strange science fiction, I also like translated literature. So the next four books I have are all books that have been translated. I'm going to try and remember to tell you what language and where they are, what language they're translated from and where they're from, but I may forget. So no promises. If I forget that, it'll either be on the screen or in the description box below. The first book I have here is Embers. This is actually a book that's been on my TBR for a while, and I kept remembering and forgetting about it, and then somebody else mentioned it or reviewed it or something, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I need to keep an eye out for that," and, I feel like I also saw it in a bookstore somewhere. I don't remember how I got a hold of this, but somehow I did. I might have ordered it. This is a Hungarian novel that is set in a secluded woodland castle where an old general prepares to receive a rare visitor, one of his closest friends who he's not seen for 41 years. They get together and they talk and they go over a past that has to do partially with the general's wife, and they have sort of a duel of words going back over their past history together and what happened with the wife. And it sounds like there was maybe some sort of love triangle going on. I don't know. I've heard good things about this. This is another short book, and the premise really excites me. I like the idea that it's sort of an isolated setting. And yeah, I like translated literature and reading world literature in general. And so I'm interested to see like why this was so popular in Hungary. The next book I have, I may have talked about on my channel already. I'm honestly losing track. But that is Fabulous Machinery for the Curious. If nothing else, this book has one of the best titles. I don't know why, it just draws me in every time. And this is a collection of kissa, I believe that's how it's pronounced, stories, which are epic stories or fairy tales or folk tales from Urdu. At least in this particular one, these were transcribed from Urdu. And my understanding is quite frequently these stories were passed on orally, though they could also be written down. These particular ones are translated into English from the Urdu. They are stories that were set in the 18th and 19th centuries and spread over Persia and Arabia to South Asia over 1500 years. And these stories just sound absolutely fabulous in nature. They're sagas of romantic love, thrilling adventures in fairyland, to picaresque stories of deception and haunting tales of nobility and viciousness. And forgotten gems that are brought to a new generation in translation. And I cannot wait. I love some good fairy tales and folk tales from other parts of the world because you just never know what you're going to get. People tell stories in such a wide variety of ways, especially historically, and that can be so much fun. The first story is relating how Kavan Shah bought three injunctions from a fakir, learned of his daughter's misdemeanors through them, and punished her and her paramour. Like, what did she do? That's what I want to know. The chronicles of past times and the storytellers of yore have strung together the lustrous pearls of these rare tales and wondrous yarns in the skein of narrative thus. That in a land among the auspiciously founded, vastly populated lands of Hindustan, the image of heaven, there lived a king who was majestic as Jamshed, glorious and of normal lineage. The praiseworthy god had conferred such grandeur, dignity, augustness, and exaltedness upon him that no other monarch of the time could claim equality with him. He was so formidable and daunting that even Rustum was unable to hold his ground before him. Sounds impressive. All right, so that is Fabulous Machinery for the Curious. I have no idea why it's called that, and nothing that I can see on the back gives any hints. But like I said, it is a collection of stories from the Kissa genre. And yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing some of these and experiencing them. And a lot of the feel of this very much reminds me of the Arabian Nights. I don't know if those are from the same genre or not. If they are, I will somehow indicate that. Translated from the French, I have Fresh Water for Flowers, and this is put out by Europa Editions, which for a while I wasn't sure how invested I wanted to get into Europa Editions. They put out books that I am very interested in just at first blush and listening to them, and I tend to find their books are pretty solidly a 4 star for me, which I feel like the more and more I think about is not actually a bad thing. Like it basically means it's guaranteed I'm going to think they're good. I think there's just a selfish part of me that really wants them to all be 5 stars, and that's probably just unfair. And what is this book about? It is a number one bestseller in France and Italy, apparently, or at least was at the time that this came out. And it tells the story of Violette Toussaint, who is a caretaker at a cemetery in a small town. Her life is lived in the her life is lived to the predictable rhythms and often funny, always moving confidences of the casual mourners, regular visitors, and sundry colleagues. And then one day, her routine is disrupted by the arrival of a police chief from out of town who has come to scatter the ashes of his recently deceased mother on the gravesite of a complete stranger. And it goes on from there. And all of that just seems really intriguing to me. Like, how frequently do you have a protagonist in a story being the caretaker at a cemetery? And then typically, I feel like that's a role that you wouldn't expect a woman to be in. And at least I feel like in stories, it's not typically a woman. And then to have the police chief come in and he's scattering ashes on a random grave, like, I don't know where this is going. Is this going to be a love story? And how do you make a love story out of that? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. And chapter one opens with a little phrase that says, "When we miss one person, everyone becomes deserted." And the book opens with, "My closest neighbors don't quake in their boots. They have no worries, don't fall in love, don't bite their nails, don't believe in chance, make no promises or noise, don't have social security, don't cry, don't search for their keys, their glasses, their remote control, their children, happiness," and on it goes. Based on the back of the book, I think we can guess why that is true of her closest neighbors. This book has been on my shelves, or this book has also been on my TBR wish list for a while, and I finally went to pick it up just to find out that they are coming out with a new edition of it later this year. But then I kind of wanted this cover. I don't know. We'll see how long that feeling lasts. But I picked up The 40 Days of Musa Dog. This is a book that is translated from German, and I actually don't remember how I first found out about this book. I think it was just wandering my old used bookstore. I kept seeing it on the shelf over and over again, and I'm pretty sure every single time it was shelved incorrectly, which may have been how I kept coming across it. And I couldn't decide if it was going to be the type of historical fiction I was interested in. And then another channel on BookTube, I will put their video in the description box below. They, at one point, one of the people on the podcast reviewed this book. And after that point, I was like, oh, sold. Sounds great. So it is a book that covers the Armenian genocide. And I have been warned that the author does it is historical fiction, and that the author does kind of stretch and sort of morph the timeline of things a bit just to make the story coherent, because I believe you are following a village of people who basically defend themselves, if I am correct. And yeah, and it kind of gets into that a little bit here on the back, where it says the result is a fuller picture of the extensive inner lives of the characters, and especially the hero. And I think that was really the author's intent in that, was not to make everything 100% historically accurate, because I don't think he was trying to follow the every single last detail of this event, but really um, translate to the reader the type of people who lived in this area and how they were able to sort of defend their own place for 40 days. That is the premise of this book. And yeah, I am excited. I always feel weird saying I'm excited to read books that are promising to be like hard and heavy and probably sad. But this book does feel like it's going to remind me a bit of War and Peace, and probably even more so of Stalingrad. At least that is my high hopes for it. And this opens chapter one. How did I get here? I'm just gonna leave it at that because it goes into a long paragraph that I feel like it's gonna be too much to get into. But it's a nice chunky work of historical fiction, and I really think it's going to be the type of historical fiction that I like, that is set in a war setting, not your typical World War II or even World War One setting, and is really looking at the lives of the people as much as it's looking at the historical events that happened. Is a fortunate man, and yeah, this is translated from the Danish. There you go. I wish they said it more clearly on the outside of the book. Okay, and this tells the story of Per Sidenius. He is a Lutheran pastor's son who revolts against his family. He moves to Copenhagen. He's handsome, ambitious. He wants to live his best life. He wants to get involved in the technological future in the 20th century. He studies engineering. He's got ideas about new canals, and life is going on. And yeah, he's first repelled and then attracted to a young Jewish woman whose family is willing and eager to underwrite his plans, and things go on from there. And my guess is not quite how he or anyone else is expecting. I have heard about this book. I've seen it around. It's put out by New York Review Books, which does tend to work pretty well for me as a publisher. And then I think I again saw it talked about in a book list that I was looking at, and they talked about it from a different angle, and that made me go, okay, yeah, just pick it up and buy it. And so this book opens the year around the time of our last war with Germany. There was a Christian minister by the name of Johann Sidenius who lived in a small provincial town in East Jutland. The town lay at the bottom of an overgrown fjord and was hidden from view by surrounding green hills. This priest was a pious and austere man. That tends to never work out well for people in books. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out for Per. How do you pronounce that first name? If you know, let me know. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what happens and what sounds like is going to be a bit of a family story drama, maybe father son stressed relationship type of situation. I don't know, but I will read and find out. And this is another chunky book. I feel like I had an odd combination of really long and very short books. All right, so that is it. Those are all the books that I have hauled at some point earlier this year. Most of the books that I've hauled, in case you're wondering, in the last few months, like pretty much since June, are books that I have been reading almost immediately because I'm reading them for like a reading challenge, or they're part of a buddy read that I already have planned and going on, that kind of thing. So I feel like despite the fact that I'm doing monthly book hauls, I'm actually doing a really good job of reading what I own, despite what this humongous stack tells you. So don't always believe everything you see on TV. Yeah, that's the lesson of this story. Anyway, let me know if you've read any of these books and how you liked them, and maybe that'll help me prioritize some of them over the others. And gosh, don't I wish I could read all these books at once. All right, that's it for me today, and I'll talk to you next time.